just where it was most needed, compelling us to stop and look about us and get our bearings. The Chinamen seemed to think we were lost, and chattered in pidgin English concerning the abundance of liddy stick chaparral, while the Indians silently scanned the billowy ridges and gulches for openings. Pushing through the thorny jungle, we at length discovered a road tending towards Coulterville, which we followed until an hour before sunset, when we reached a dry ranch and camped for the night. Camping in the foothills with a flock of sheep is simple and easy, but far from pleasant. The sheep were allowed to pick up what they could find in the neighbourhood until after sunset, watched by the shepherd, while the others gathered wood, made a fire, cooked, unpacked, and fed the horses, etc. About dusk the weary sheep were gathered on the highest open spot near camp, where they willingly bunched close together, and after each mother had found her lamb and suckled it, all lay down and required no attention until morning. Supper was announced by the call, "Grub!" Each with a tin plate helped himself direct from the pots and pans, while chatting about such camp studies as sheep feed, mines, coyotes, bears, or adventures during the memorable gold days of pay dirt. The Indian kept in the background, saying never a word, as if he belonged to another species. The meal finished, the dogs were fed, the smokers smoked by the fire, and under the influence of fullness and tobacco, the calm that settled on their faces seemed almost divine, something like the mellow meditative glow portrayed on the countenance of saints. Then, suddenly, as if awakening from a dream, each with a sigh or a grunt knocked the ashes out of his pipe, yawned, gazed at the fire a few moments, and said, "Well, I believe I'll turn in," and straightway vanished beneath his blankets. The fire smothered and flickered an hour or two longer. The stars shone brighter. Coons, coyotes, and owls stirred the silence here and there, while crickets and hylas made a cheerful, continuous music, so fitting and full that it seemed a part of the very body of the night. The only discordance came from a snoring sleeper and the coughing sheep with dust in their throats. In the starlight the flock looked like a big grey blanket. June 4. The camp was astir at daybreak. Coffee, bacon and beans formed breakfast, followed by quick dish-washing and packing. A general bleating began about sunrise. As soon as a mother ewe arose, her lamb came bounding and bunting for its breakfast, and after the 1,000 youngsters had been suckled, the flock began to nibble and spread. The restless wethers with ravenous appetites were the first to move, but dare not go far from the main body. Billy and the Indian and the Chinaman kept them headed along the weary road, and allowed them to pick up what little they could find on a breadth of about a quarter of a mile. But as several flocks had already gone ahead of us, scarce a leaf, green or dry, was left. Therefore the starving flock had to be hurried on over the bare hot hills to the nearest of the green pastures, about 20 or 30 miles from here. The pack animals were led by Don Quixote, a heavy rifle over his shoulder, intended for bears and wolves. This day has been as hot and dusty as the first, leading over gently sloping brown hills with mostly the same vegetation, except for the strange-looking Sabine pine, Pinus sabiniana, which here forms small groves or is scattered among the blue oaks. The trunk divides at a height of 15 or 20 feet into 2 or more stems, outleaning or nearly upright, with many straggling branches and long grey needles casting but little shade. In general appearance this tree looks more like a palm than a pine. The cones are about 6 or 7 inches long, about 5 in diameter, very heavy, and last long after they fall, so that the ground beneath the trees is covered with them. They make fine, resiny, light-giving campfires, next to the ears of Indian corn, the most beautiful fuel I've ever seen. The nuts, the Don tells me, are gathered in great quantities by the Digger Indians for food. They are about as large and hard-shelled as hazelnuts. Food and fire fit for the gods from the same fruit. June 5. This morning, a few hours after setting out with the crawling sheep cloud, we gained the summit of the first well-defined bench on the mountain flank at Pino Blanco. The Sabine pines interest me greatly. They are so airy and strangely palm-like, I was eager to sketch them, and was in a fervour of excitement without accomplishing much. I managed to halt long enough, however, to make a tolerably fair sketch of Pino Blanco Peak from the southwest side, where there is a small field and vineyard irrigated by a stream that makes a pretty fall on its way down a gorge by the roadside. After gaining the open summit of this first bench, feeling the natural exhilaration due to the slight elevation of 1,000 feet or so, and the hopes excited concerning the outlook to be obtained, a magnificent section of the Merced Valley at what is called Horseshoe Bend came full into sight. A glorious wilderness that seemed to be calling with 1,000 songful voices. Bold, down-sweeping slopes, feathered with pines and clumps of manzanita, with sunny, open spaces between them, make up most of the foreground. The middle and background present fold beyond fold of finely modelled hills, and ridges rising into mountain-like masses in the distance, all covered with a shaggy growth of chaparral, mostly adenostoma, planted so marvellously close and even that it looks like soft, rich plush, without a single tree or bare spot. As far as the eye can reach it extends, a heaving, swelling sea of green as regular and continuous as that produced by the heaths of Scotland. The sculpture of the landscape is as striking as its main lines in its lavish richness of detail. A grand congregation of massive heights, with the river shining between, each carved into smooth, graceful folds without leaving a single rocky angle exposed, as if the delicate fluting and ridging fashioned out of metamorphic slates had been carefully sandpapered. The whole landscape showed design, like man's noblest sculptures. How wonderful the power of its beauty! Gazing awe-stricken, I might have left everything for it. Glad, endless work would be mine, tracing the forces that have brought forth its features, its rocks and plants and animals and glorious weather. Beauty beyond thought everywhere, beneath, above, made and being made for ever. I gazed and longed and admired until the dusty sheep and packs were far out of sight, made hurried notes and a sketch, though there was no need of either, for the colours and lines and expression of this divine landscape countenance are so burned into mind and heart they surely can never grow dim. The evening of this charm day is cool, calm, cloudless, and full of a kind of lightning I have never seen before, white glowing cloud-shaped masses down among the trees and bushes, like quick-throbbing fireflies in the Wisconsin meadows, rather than the so-called wildfire. The spreading hairs of the horses' tails and sparks from our blankets show how highly charged the air is. June 6. We are now on what may be called the second bench or plateau of the range, after making many small ups and downs over belts of hill waves, with, of course, corresponding changes in the vegetation. In open spots many of the lowland compositae are still to be found, and some of the Mariposa tulips and other conspicuous members of the lily family, but the characteristic blue oak of the foothills is left below, and its place is taken by a fine large species, Quercus californica, with deeply lobed deciduous leaves, picturesquely divided trunk, and broad, massy, finely lobed and modelled head. Here also, at a height of about 2,500 feet, we come to the edge of the great coniferous forest, made up mostly of yellow pine with just a few sugar pines. We are now in the mountains, and they are in us, kindling enthusiasm, making every nerve quiver.